Long before the advent of charts, models, and textbooks in economics, a single individual recognized truths that many systems still feign ignorance towards. Wealth does not follow a linear trajectory. Power does not accumulate endlessly. Moreover, prosperity, if left unchecked, carries within it the seeds of its own decline. This insight was not conceived in an academic environment. Rather, it emerged from observations made by someone who witnessed the rise, zenith, and fall of empires from an intimate perspective. Step into the realm of economic history, where the intricate interplay of money, authority, and human experience unfolds. Here, nothing is ever as straightforward as it appears. In the 14th century, while Europe grappled with plagues, wars, and feudal fragmentation, a North African thinker quietly penned what may be the most astute analysis of economic cycles ever documented. His name was Ibn Khaldun. Centuries prior to the contributions of Adam Smith or John Maynard Keynes and long before modern macroeconomic theories took shape, he articulated profound reasons why economies expand, why states grow in size and influence, and ultimately why they collapse under their own weight. As time passes, however, success can lead to changes in behavior. With the accumulation of wealth, elites often find themselves distancing from the very productive base that enabled their prosperity. Leaders become increasingly isolated from the general populace. The bureaucratic apparatus expands, with military and administrative roles becoming hereditary rather than earned through merit or hard work. The discipline that once underpinned the system begins to erode as comfort replaces necessity. Consequently, social cohesion weakens. It is crucial to note that this observation is not a moral judgment on society's character. Ibn Khaldun was not condemning these communities for laziness or lack of ambition. Instead, he was articulating a theory about incentives. When survival ceases to be the foremost concern for individuals within a society, their behaviors inevitably shift. Tolerance for risk diminishes as innovation slows down. Extracting resources becomes simpler than creating new value from them. As a result, the state begins to rely on past achievements instead of current productivity. Nowhere is this phenomenon more evident than in his examination of taxation systems. Ibn Khaldun pointed out that in the early phases of any state's existence, tax rates were relatively low. Individuals engaged in work, trade, and investment willingly because the benefits outweighed the burdens imposed by taxation. Economic activity flourished during this period, leading to increasing revenues. However, as states developed and expanded their functions, supporting larger courts, armies, and bureaucratic structures, the rulers began raising taxes significantly. Initially, government revenues continued on an upward trajectory, yet eventually higher taxes became detrimental to production levels. People began working less, trade diminished, and consequently the tax base shrank. The reaction from leaders was predictably counterproductive. In an effort to maintain revenue streams, taxes were repeatedly increased without regard for diminishing returns. Each hike in taxes only accelerated the decline of economic vitality, as states found themselves starving not due to inadequate taxation levels, but because they extracted too much from an ever-diminishing economic landscape. In contemporary terms, Ibn Khaldun was describing what we now recognize as economic contraction, a concept that would not be articulated until centuries later. The strength of this insight lies in its neutrality. He did not advocate for low taxes as inherently positive or high taxes as negative, but rather sought to illuminate how different tax strategies could impact societal dynamics over time. In essence, Ibn Khaldun's analysis serves as a timeless reminder of how interconnected trust and productivity are within societies, and how pivotal it is for leaders to strike a balance between taxation and incentivizing growth through engagement with their populace. He argued that incentives are crucial. When individuals perceive that their efforts will be met with punishment rather than reward, they tend to withdraw. The system weakens when capital is extracted at a faster rate than it can replenish itself. States do not collapse due to a lack of authority. Rather, they fall apart because they exhaust the very sources of their strength. Ibn Khaldun extended this reasoning to encompass public spending and corruption. As states aged, he observed, rulers became accustomed to opulence. Life at court expanded, leading to a misallocation of state resources toward maintaining status instead of enhancing productivity. Bureaucratic structures proliferated, with positions being sold or inherited rather than earned through merit. Corruption did not begin with malicious intent. It arose from normalization. Everyone adapted to this new standard of behavior. The system did not sense that it was broken. Instead, it felt entitled to certain privileges. This sense of entitlement had significant ramifications. Expenditures began to rise more rapidly than production levels could sustain. To counterbalance this disparity, taxation increased significantly. Enforcement mechanisms were strengthened to ensure compliance with regulations, further eroding public trust. As social cohesion weakened, the cost and effectiveness of law enforcement diminished proportionately. The state found itself in a predicament where it spent more while receiving less in return, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of decline. Ibn Khaldun was born in 1332 in what is now Tunisia, a region far removed from stability. Dynasties rose swiftly only to fall just as rapidly. Cities flourished and then faced stark decline almost overnight. The plague spread with ruthless efficiency among the populace. Authority frequently shifted between rulers and tribal factions in a tumultuous dance of power dynamics. It was hardly an environment conducive to abstract theorizing. It was pure chaos, and this chaos served as his experimental laboratory. It is remarkable how contemporary this analysis appears today. One could easily substitute dynasties for institutions and courtiers for bureaucrats while viewing supply chains as modern caravans. The underlying logic remains unchanged despite the passage of time. Ibn Khaldun did not merely describe medieval peculiarities. He articulated universal behaviors observed within systems of power and prosperity. Perhaps his most significant contribution lies in the notion that markets reflect human behavior before they reflect numerical data. Price fluctuations occur as a result of shifting trust levels among market participants. Productivity increases when incentives align favorably for all involved parties. Decline does not initiate with an outright collapse but rather with subtle shifts in collective behavior. Diminished trust leads to greater exploitation and weakened social bonds. Ibn Khaldun did not believe that we could prevent such cycles from occurring. However, he maintained that we could understand them deeply. Awareness does not halt decline but dispels illusions surrounding it. This understanding replaces surprise with clarity, which he considered the closest humanity has ever come to achieving control over its fate. If Ibn Khaldun were alive today, he would likely remain unimpressed by our advancements in technology. He would not be distracted by the rapid pace of financial markets or the complexity of modern financial instruments and economic jargon that often muddle clear understanding. Instead, he would focus on the enduring truths about human nature and governance that transcend time and technological progress. His insights remind us that regardless of how advanced our systems become or how sophisticated our tools are, the fundamental dynamics between individuals and institutions remain constant throughout history. Understanding these dynamics can provide valuable lessons about sustainability and resilience in contemporary societies facing their own challenges related to trust, governance, and economic stability. Ultimately, Ibn Khaldun's wisdom serves as a timeless guide for leaders and citizens alike as they navigate the complexities of modern life while grappling with enduring questions about power dynamics and societal health. He would gaze beyond the screens and spreadsheets, focusing instead on the fundamental elements that have always captured his attention: incentives, cohesion, and power. What he would observe might feel painfully familiar, as if history were repeating itself right before his eyes. Contemporary economies often cling to the belief that they have transcended historical cycles. Progress is framed as a linear journey, constant and cumulative. Each generation confidently asserts that it has finally unraveled the mystery of instability. They boast of superior data, enhanced policies, and more robust institutions. Yet, the essential idea proposed by Ibn Khaldun resonates deeply within this optimistic narrative. The cyclical nature of economic systems does not vanish as they become more sophisticated. Rather, it accelerates. In today's world, social cohesion still exists. It simply manifests in less visible ways. Trust in institutions, confidence in currencies, faith in regulations, and a willingness to collaborate within vast, impersonal frameworks are markers of modern solidarity. When these elements thrive, economies flourish. Individuals are more inclined to invest their resources. Risk appears manageable and reasonable long-term planning seems feasible. Conversely, when these foundations weaken, interactions become purely transactional. Short-term thinking prevails while extraction overshadows contribution. This phenomenon is particularly evident during periods of economic expansion. Initially, growth feels productive and invigorating. New businesses emerge and innovations proliferate. Profit becomes closely tied to genuine output. However, over time, success alters behavior patterns drastically. Capital begins to accumulate disproportionately. Barriers to entry increase significantly. Financial engineering starts to overshadow real production capabilities, leading wealth to become less about value creation and more about positional advantage within the economic system. This reflects a modern interpretation of Ibn Khaldun's elite class drifting away from tangible production. Rather than being an ivory tower academic disconnected from reality, Ibn Khaldun served at royal courts and advised rulers directly. He observed governments squandering wealth on extravagant projects while imposing heavy taxes on their citizens, eroding legitimacy only to be taken aback when systems crumbled around them. Over time, he began to notice a troubling pattern repeating itself across different contexts. Varied names, diverse religions, distinct locales, but inevitably the same trajectory unfolded. Discipline would descend into comfort. Comfort would lead to decay. Decay would ultimately spiral into degradation. Governments encounter similar pressures that he described centuries ago. As economies expand, so do states alongside them. Their programs multiply rapidly while administrative layers thicken considerably. Expectations among citizens soar higher than ever before. None of these developments are inherently malicious. Rather, they represent a structural evolution within society. Prosperity generates demands that only further prosperity can temporarily satisfy. When growth begins to falter, however, commitments remain steadfast while generating income becomes increasingly difficult. The temptation for opportunistic extraction intensifies under such conditions. This is where taxation intersects with debt management and monetary policy in contemporary governance structures. Modern states do not rely solely on increasing taxes. They resort to borrowing funds instead. They may inflate the currency deliberately or defer expenses into future fiscal periods to manage immediate needs without confronting underlying challenges head-on. Yet the logic uncovered by Ibn Khaldun remains relevant even in our current context. Its insights offer crucial perspectives for understanding economic dynamics today amidst growing complexity and interdependence among global systems. As societies grapple with these enduring issues of balance between equity and growth, it becomes imperative to reflect on historical lessons while adapting strategies for navigating an ever-evolving landscape marked by both opportunity and uncertainty, a delicate dance between innovation and stability that continues to shape human experience across generations. As the burden of maintaining a system begins to outweigh the expected benefits of participation, cohesion starts to wane. Individuals may distance themselves economically, politically, or psychologically, leading to a gradual erosion of trust. Compliance with established norms becomes fragile, and the social fabric begins to fray. In this context, debt acts as a form of deferred taxation. It enables governments to maintain living standards and institutional structures without facing an immediate decline in productivity. For a time, this arrangement appears to function effectively. Trust remains intact, markets absorb new outputs, and growth seems stable. However, the underlying dynamics remain unchanged. The system continues to consume future production to uphold existing frameworks. Ultimately, the arithmetic of sustainability becomes unavoidable. This moment would be instantly recognized by an astute observer like Ibn Khaldun. It represents a phase where complexity surpasses coordination, where preserving appearances takes precedence over maintaining foundational principles. Leaders often mistake temporary stability for enduring strength during such times. This period is not merely one of collapse. Rather, it is a pre-crisis state, an interval when systems feel most confident yet simultaneously most vulnerable. The resilience of this cycle stems not from malevolent intentions but from normative behaviors emerging in successful environments. People respond to incentives while institutions prioritize self-preservation. Elites rationalize their resource extraction efforts. Each action seems justified in isolation until the broader patterns become evident. Modern financial markets amplify these tendencies significantly. Asset prices increase at a pace that exceeds wage growth, leading to speculative activities outpacing actual production metrics. Financial assets become detached from their intrinsic value, creating an illusion of wealth that lacks the structural foundation necessary for its longevity. When corrections occur in this environment, they do more than simply adjust prices. They test faith itself. What made Ibn Khaldun's insights particularly relevant today is his understanding that economic systems are not mere machines but rather social organisms. They depend heavily on trust, cohesion among individuals, incentives for productivity, and shared beliefs among citizens. When these elements begin to weaken, when trust erodes and societal bonds fray, not even vast reserves of gold or immense power can safeguard a structure from eventual collapse. Who retains confidence in the system? Who anticipates protection from its mechanisms? Who bears the costs of disillusionment? Ibn Khaldun understood that legitimacy holds greater weight than sheer power. States can enforce compliance temporarily, but cannot indefinitely coerce productivity improvements through force alone. When individuals cease to believe that the system serves them well, participation dwindles dramatically. As engagement declines, innovation stagnates and risk appetites diminish. Economic contraction does not stem from a lack of resources but rather from a breakdown in cooperation amongst participants within the system. This phenomenon elucidates why economic cycles often appear so ruthless. These are not mere financial adjustments but profound social transformations. Power dynamics shift as old structures weaken and new groups emerge with enhanced cohesion and discipline. The landscape alters significantly during these transitions as fresh coalitions rise to prominence while previous establishments falter under pressure. In essence, what unfolds is a reconfiguration of societal roles and responsibilities, a metamorphosis driven by collective behavior shaped by trust and collaboration. The interplay between institutional integrity and public perception thus defines the trajectory of economies through cyclical phases marked by both turbulence and opportunity for renewal. Awareness of this intricate balance between trust and efficacy becomes crucial in navigating future challenges within any socio-economic framework. The cycle of renewal occurs not because history seeks equilibrium, but rather due to the relentless pull of incentives. It is crucial to recognize that Ibn Khaldun never claimed to offer salvation. He did not hold the belief that wisdom could preserve systems at their zenith forever. His insights were far more unsettling than that. Decline is not merely a failure of intellect, it is a consequence wrought by success itself. The very forces that generate wealth ultimately undermine the conditions that made such prosperity achievable. What implications does this have for the individual? Although Ibn Khaldun did not pen down personal finance advice, his theories present something equally valuable: perspective. Understanding the nature of cycles does not render one immune to them. However, it transforms how you interpret these phenomena. You begin to discern peaks for what they truly are and cease conflating scale with stability. You learn to recognize when incentives shift, even if prices have yet to reflect those changes. This understanding marks the subtle beginning of true financial freedom, not through perfect timing or prophetic foresight, but through humility. It involves acknowledging that systems are temporary, trust is fragile, and cohesion holds greater worth than any class of assets imaginable. There is no need to flee from cycles. Rather, one must stop being astonished by them. Ibn Khaldun's brilliance lay not in forecasting the future but in stripping away its mystique. By anchoring economics within the framework of human behavior, he made cycles perceptible. Once something becomes visible, it loses its capacity to shock or surprise us. History does not repeat itself due to human folly. Instead, it recurs because incentives remain stubbornly unchanged. Long before modern economics assigned names, graphs, and equations to cycles, Ibn Khaldun saw this clearly. His work serves as a reminder that beneath every market fluctuation, every government action, and every financial system lies a singular fragile foundation: trust. When trust flourishes, prosperity follows closely behind it. Conversely, when trust crumbles, a silent decline commences, often well before headlines catch up with reality. If this perspective has sparked new insights for you, consider how history holds answers waiting to be uncovered. Each lesson from the past can illuminate paths forward if only we choose to seek them out actively and thoughtfully. As we navigate our complex world today, recognizing these timeless truths can empower us to make wiser decisions in our personal and societal endeavors alike. Embracing this knowledge allows us not just to survive the inevitable cycles, but also thrive within them as we cultivate deeper understanding and resilience against future uncertainties. At the core of his philosophical framework lay a concept he termed asabiya, which translates loosely as social cohesion, the vital adhesive that binds groups together in unity and purpose. This concept highlights that societies thrive when individuals feel connected to one another through common interests and collective goals. In examining historical patterns through this lens of social cohesion versus disintegration, we gain invaluable insights into current economic phenomena and political shifts around the globe today. Understanding how communities can flourish or falter based on their internal connections offers a compelling narrative about human behavior across ages, one that continues to resonate amid contemporary challenges faced by nations worldwide. The lessons drawn from Ibn Khaldun's observations transcend time and geography. They urge us to reflect on our present circumstances through a deeper understanding of our shared humanity and interconnectedness within society. Through recognizing these patterns woven throughout history, we can aspire to create more resilient structures that withstand the tests of time, rather than succumb to inevitable decline fueled by neglect of social bonds essential for thriving civilizations. In economic terms, this concept extends far beyond mere cultural unity. It fundamentally revolves around trust among individuals, shared motivations, and a collective willingness to cooperate for the greater good. People are often ready to make sacrifices and invest in something that transcends their personal interests. The renowned historian and philosopher Ibn Khaldun observed that societies characterized by strong cohesion tend to be more productive, resilient, and capable of amassing wealth even when resources are limited. Communities that foster mutual trust exhibit a remarkable work ethic, diligently protect their institutions, and adhere to norms that promote long-term stability. Wealth tends to accumulate naturally within these groups. This is not merely because they started off with more resources, but rather due to a structural framework that encourages productivity and innovation.